It's Thanksgiving Day in 2010, and in most places across the U.S., families are gathering together to celebrate and share their gratitude with each other. But in the quaint town of East Hartford, Connecticut, police are arriving to perform a wellness check at the Bednarz family home. When they knocked on the door, they waited for a response, but when no one came to the door, they headed around the back and found the back door unlocked. When they entered the home, it was eerily quiet, and upon entering the hallway, they found the walls painted in blood. Well, hello, oddballs. It's your host, Bobby.
And your co-host, Lexi.
And this is Oddities on Elm Street. Welcome back to the pod, and thanks for joining us on today's episode.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yes. Or
No,
Indigenous Peoples Day. Some people celebrate that.
Yeah.
How was your week? Let's do a quick check-in.
Oh, check. It was pretty good. Don't really remember much of it.
Okay.
I don't know. I've just been busy.
Yeah.
I guess.
In the mode.
I'm trying to prepare for the holidays. And,
yeah, what are you guys doing?
We're going up to Trevor's parents' cottage.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, but then I work Wednesday, Friday, Saturday.
Of this week?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
That sucks.
But, oh well.
Yeah, I'm excited.
You?
I think Bowie and I are going to go up to the cabin because Miller has to work all weekend.
Dang.
Yeah. I told you about that guy that my dad caught on the camera.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay.
And
they caught him.
They did?
Yes. He is in jail now. All of the neighbors had... Okay, let me back it up. There's probably people that don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So my dad has like a trail cam, like he has 40 acres up north, and he has a trail cam on the property, and he caught this guy stealing a heater out of his hunting shack. And I guess up there right now, there was a manhunt for this guy who has like a criminal past, but most recently stole like 5 different vehicles and kept ditching them, and then went on a police chase in one of the stolen vehicles and was able to get away on foot. So they were like hunting for this guy.
Love it.
And my dad turned the photos over to the police, and the police officer was like, yeah, we're looking for a guy in that area. And the guy's like considered armed and dangerous, supposedly. So thankfully my dad wasn't there when he caught those pictures of him. But they like showed up and searched the property. But before the police had gotten there, my dad had reached out to all of his neighbors, and they had all shown up to go figure out what was going on. So the guy probably like saw some people pulling up on the property and took off before the police could get there.
Right.
But I guess a bunch of people were like posting on the local Facebook group talking about how they had like a propane tank stolen. There was another person saying that their daughter's dirt bike was stolen. So the guy was like really trying to get away.
Jeez.
But yes, they have since arrested him, so we can all rest easy.
That's
because
good.
I'm going to be up there this weekend, and I don't fuck with that. I don't want any part. So,
oh, well, good.
Yeah. And then have you heard about the missing boy in Rockford?
I have. Yeah, Trevor has been sending me stuff about it, which is weird because usually I'm the one sending him stuff. So.
Did you hear the update?
Yeah.
It's so sad. He was 16 years old. He's been missing for over a month, and they just found his body like half submerged in a swampy area. I guess what had happened was him and his friends had stolen someone's car and like went on a joyride. And when they were pulled over when they were pulled over by police, they took off running on foot, and all of his friends were captured, but he wasn't. And I don't know if it's just a case of, like, they didn't say anything, like, hey, there's another one of us, because they didn't want to squeal on their friend or whatever.
That's my guess.
But he took off running and got stuck in a swampy area, and they believe that he died the same day, but they've just now found his body a month later. And they said that the cause of death was accidental drowning. So it's really sad, though, because, I mean, it's sad anyways, because he's a 16-year-old, but his parents were assuming he was still out there, but was scared that he was going to get in trouble, and that's why he wouldn't come home. And the police had even put out, like, like a press conference sort of thing, speaking to the news, saying, like, hey, if you're watching this, just know you're not going to get in trouble. We just want to know you're safe.
Mm-hmm.
And he was already dead the whole time. And that happened, like, within our town that we grew up in. So
yeah,
it's not,
like not far from where we went to high school.
Yeah, really close, actually.
Yeah.
Like right in the backyard, pretty much. So it's a very sad day here. Okay. I'm going to do this now before I forget, because I forgot last time. So we have quite a few new patrons, actually, but for some reason, y'all aren't getting back to me. Kind of rude. Just kidding. But no, if you joined our Patreon, I always send a message as soon as you do, asking what your preferred name is so that we can give you a shout out on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've just joined, please check your messages because there's probably one in there. But our new patron, Lily, did get back to me. So a big thank you to Lily for joining our Patreon.
Yay, Lily!
But we have like 4 more people that
God.
I'm just waiting to hear back from. So, also, this is going to be a really long intro. I'm sorry, but we took a couple weeks off to try to catch up. If there's ever something going on with the podcast and you're like, where did they go? Check our Patreon. You don't have to be subscribed or like pay us money to get podcast updates. Right. You can literally just follow the page and you'll get notified. So patreon.com/oddities on Elm Street. Go check us out. So for our topic today, we're going to do a deep dive into a case that isn't really well known. I literally wasn't able to find any podcast episode on this. I don't know if you had any luck.
Nope.
So we might be the first ones. And in that case, our listeners probably haven't heard of it either. So it's a new experience for everyone. Oh. So let's start by introducing the Bednarz family. The Bednarz family consisted of parents Andrew and Beverly, who settled down in the suburban town of East Hartford, Connecticut. In this home, they raised their children, and they made it the kind of place that had become a safe haven for all of their family and friends. At the time of our story, Beverly is in her 70s, and she's enjoying her life as a retiree, doing things like tending to her garden. Her husband, Andrew, is 20 years her senior and is 92 years old. The couple has 2 adult children together named Brett and Candace. Brett never married, but Candace married a man named Jose, and together they have a 17-year-old daughter named Tiffany. Although Beverly and Andrew's children were well into adulthood, they still gathered at the family home every Sunday to enjoy dinner together, which is very nice.
Yeah.
Brett and Candace are super close as brother and sister. Like, they would go to war for each other.
Right.
And their father, Andrew, and Brett are also incredibly close. They often work together on projects in the family's wood shop. As Andrew's getting older, he's making proper arrangements, and he informs his son, Brett, that he plans to include him on his last will and testament, and he makes it apparent that Brett can expect to inherit everything after his father's passing. The family gathers together for dinner once more on September 10th, 2010, but this time things are tense. Candace and her husband, Jose, are being snippy with each other, and it's making the rest of the family kind of uncomfortable. The 2 of them have been having some marital issues for a while now, as they were struggling financially, and as such a tight-knit family, it's hard for the other family members to not get involved.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when they make it so obvious that something is going on. They're putting their business out there. Yes.
Right.
But the family tries to settle everyone down and clear the air before it escalates, and they continue dinner. They continue dinner as usual. 5 days later, Brett stops by the family home to check on his father, Andrew, which was a normal thing.
Because he doesn't have
a wife or kids. Yeah.
Right.
So him and his father always have some project going together. But unfortunately, on this day, he finds his father sprawled out on the hallway floor, and he can't find a pulse. Andrew is pronounced dead, and his cause of death is later determined to be a heart attack. Brett is obviously devastated, by the death of his father, he considers him his best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And to be the one to find him, too,
Yeah.
has to be a very traumatic experience.
Right.
But it's only about to get worse.
Mm-hmm.
After Andrew's death, the family gathered again, but this time the tone was much different than their typical Sunday dinners. Now they're tasked with reading Andrew's will, and much to Brett's surprise, his father had not intended for him to inherit all of his things. He wasn't listed as a beneficiary of his estate. Instead, everything would go to his wife, Beverly.
Which, you know, kind of makes a lot of sense to me. But...
yeah. I mean, especially granted, like, Andrew made it to 92 and his wife is only 70.
That's what, exactly, like...
What do you expect her to do?
She doesn't work.
Yeah, she's retired.
Right. Like...
No, you're on your own now, Bev. Like...
Right.
I don't really understand.
Everything's going to Brett.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
No, I really don't.
I think the biggest thing, like, I think the biggest issue is that Beverly kept everything to herself. She didn't help the children out financially, and I think that's why they...
Well, I think that part of her doing that is because of how angry they got.
Yeah.
Because while they were at the reading of the will, and, you know, the lawyer or whoever reads it, and Brett is like, that's not what I was told, and Candace is like, yeah, what the hell, it's all supposed to go to Brett.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, if I were the mother, and I just lost my husband, and my kids are freaking pissed that my husband left our money to me,
yeah,
and not them.
Right.
You know, okay, I really admire her.
Yeah, I get that too.
And also, she did offer help to Jose later down the line. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it still doesn't make sense to me, but that's the only thing I can see them really being upset about. But so everything is going to Beverly. Andrew's estate not only included their house, their workshop, and all of their material things, but also a big chunk of money, and once that was all left to Beverly, she decided she wasn't going to give any of that to her children. Now, let me remind you, not only do we have Brett, who was expecting to inherit all of his father's things and was looking forward to specifically having the workshop for himself, but you also have Candace, who is actively going through some type of separation with her husband, Jose, because of financial trouble.
Right.
So I'm sure both siblings realistically were expecting, or dare I even say looking forward to, receiving some type of inheritance. So the fact that their mother Beverly was keeping everything for herself really tore the family apart. There became a lot of issues with jealousy and trust, and it ultimately led to her children becoming estranged from their mother.
Sad.
It is, especially over money.
Right.
Especially while you're mourning the death of a family member. But Brett specifically really trusted in his father's words, and this planted seeds of doubt in his mind about his mother Beverly's intentions, and he actually started to believe that she had changed Andrew's will to make sure that it excluded him and his sister. Like, he really just thinks his mom is just evil.
And killed him.
And was responsible for her death. Yeah. So that belief goes even deeper because, yes, Brett also begins to blame his mother for his father's death. He says that Beverly was the cause of Andrew's heart attack because she stressed him out so much. Which is really, that's a really shitty thing to say.
That's so shitty.
Like, wow. So, this
Brett, you're not getting any fucking money.
Yeah, definitely cutting you loose after that. Like, what? So this distrust of his mother just continues to grow until it eventually just grows into a deep-seated hatred for her. And he has little trouble turning the rest of the family against Beverly as well. Candace takes her brother's side and also cuts things off with Beverly because Brett had gotten in her head and planted these seeds to make her believe that her mother had something to do with her father's death. I don't know what exactly made them think that she could be even partially responsible, but this is just what they believed, and as a result, they became estranged from their mother, Beverly. So...
And, like, so quick, too.
Yeah.
Like, I don't remember exactly, but it wasn't even a year.
Oh,
it was like
months.
2 or 3 months.
Yeah. that they had just turned on each other
Right,
because of
like,
money.
How devastating.
Yeah, so now Beverly is not only dealing with the grief of losing her husband and trying to navigate these difficult relationships with her adult children,
Mm-hmm.
but now she's left alone in this big empty house.
Right.
And so in an attempt to feel less isolated, she invites 2 of her friends from church to come and live with her.
And to help her out.
Yeah, and their names are Pamela Johns and Michael Ramsey. They start to rent out one of the rooms in Beverly's house. It's a big house. She has plenty of room, and this way she doesn't feel so lonely. And then the couple, like you said, was also there to provide help if she needed an extra hand.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Candace and Jose are really starting to feel the pressure now because they were struggling financially before, but now that Candace has cut her mom out of her life, she no longer has financial help from her.
Right.
Candace and her daughter, Tiffany, used to really depend on Beverly's money, and this is just putting more stress on Candace and Jose's already strained relationship. After one particular fight, Jose threatens divorce, but he doesn't just say it out of spite. He actually calls his mother-in-law Beverly. Candace and Beverly's relationship may be non-existent at this point, but Jose continues to speak to her, and he does eventually end up leaving, and him and Candace go their separate ways.
Well, and because, like, when the family was all still together and they would go to their family dinners or whatever, it seemed like Brett and Candace would always, like, team up
Against Jose.
Yeah. And I think Beverly had, like, a soft spot for him.
Yeah.
And would often try to, like, be on his team to
come
help.
to his defense.
Right.
Yeah.
So that kind of gave them, like, a special, much more, like, mother-son relationship.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I believe Jose was working multiple different jobs to try and support him and his daughter and his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And they really ragged on him for not being able to get a decent 9-to-5 type job. Like, he worked a lot of retail jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And that became kind of a point of contention between Candace and
so
Jose.
shitty.
And then
He's working his ass off.
I know. That's what, like, fucks me up, you know? It's just shitty.
Mm-hmm.
By this point in time, Thanksgiving has finally come around, and police officers respond to Beverly's home after a friend calls, reporting her concerns after not being able to get in touch with her for multiple days. She said she'd been trying to reach Beverly for 3 days now with no response. One of the officers sent out there is a woman named Tara Hewins, and she says that when she responded to the Bednarz home, she rang the doorbell, knocked loudly numerous times, but there was still no answer. So, her and her partner go around to the back of the house and the door is unlocked. Officer Hewins pokes her head in and takes a step inside. She notices that the house feels too quiet. She sees a hallway straight ahead of her, and all over the walls she sees what looks like blood. But then she says there's so much of it that it has to be paint. Like, she could not wrap her mind around the idea that...
Yeah, she was like, is that paint? And then she, like, walked further in and saw the body and was like, nope, that's blood. A few more steps in and they find a body. When Officer Hewins finds this person, she disturbingly says this person is clearly deceased because they have major trauma to their head. Just down the hallway, there's another, even more gruesome discovery. The second responding officer calls out, "We have 2 more in here." Now, homicide detectives have arrived on scene of this triple murder. The new house guest, Pamela Johns, was the one found in the hallway. Around her body, investigators could see skull fragments laying around her. In the bathroom on the floor is Michael Ramsey, and next to him, leaning against the tub, is Beverly. All 3 victims had severe blunt force injuries to their heads. Michael was found with defensive wounds on his hands and up his arms. They couldn't tell exactly what weapon was used, but they could tell that it was consistent with a hammer. And they also noted that this had to have been a crime of passion. Whoever was responsible had to have been so angry that they just released all of this violence on these poor people. It was definitely overkill. And
they knew there was no other motive than it just being incredibly personal. So at the scene, investigators had a few clues to go off from, but with the amount of blood, they knew that the perpetrator had to have been covered in it, making it likely that they probably had to clean themselves and change their clothing before fleeing the scene. From the state of their bodies, they can see that decomposition hasn't set in quite yet, but can also tell that the blood isn't fresh, and that kind of gives them a time frame for when the murders could have been committed.
Right.
They can also see that the victims are wearing their pajamas, suggesting that they were likely attacked in the evening sometime. They can't establish an exact time of death, but they have a pretty good window of opportunity, and after pulling Beverly's phone records, they find when her phone was last used, and then about 48 hours later, her and her friend's bodies are discovered. So sometime in between that window for now. While processing the scene, one of the investigators finds a tissue on the ground. She noticed that it looked out of place because it was sitting right in the doorway, and when they looked further, they saw some blood on it, so they collected it into evidence.
Yep.
But as we know, processing this evidence in a lab can take some time.
Takes a hot minute.
Yeah. So in the meantime, police are canvassing the neighborhood, and while they're doing so, they turn up a very promising lead. One neighbor explained how she hadn't seen Beverly in a few days, which was strange because she was usually out being active, tending to her garden. Right. And even though the neighbor recalls not seeing her around for a few days, they do remember seeing a white car in her driveway late one night. The description she's given of the car is one that matches Candace's daughter, Tiffany's car, so Beverly's granddaughter. Everyone in the neighborhood that was at all close with Beverly knew of her granddaughter Tiffany and could easily recognize her car. But what they don't know is that since Andrew's death, Beverly and Tiffany have also had a falling out just like the rest of the family, so police immediately make their way over to the Ortiz household to question Tiffany in person. When they arrive, they note books about serial killers.
This thing was like, give me a freaking break, guys.
I know, I literally have that in my notes. They found these books about serial killers that were found around the house, which they thought was odd. I don't think it's odd. Here we are.
They don't know shit.
But they just kind of took a mental note of it, and then Tiffany claimed that the books belonged to her boyfriend. Police asked if she would allow them to take a look at her car since it matches the one seen at Beverly's house shortly before she was found dead, and Tiffany responds, "Look, a lot of people use my car. It could have been my mom. It could have been my uncle. As long as they put gas in my car, I don't give a fuck who uses it." I mean, she didn't say that verbatim, but she's like, I don't care who uses it. And realistically, both Candace and Brett could have used it to stop over at Beverly's house.
Yeah. Or Tiffany.
Any of them.
Right.
So back at the scene, detectives find Beverly's life insurance policy, and they note that for some reason, she had recently changed the beneficiary to Jose Ortiz, Candace's now ex-husband and Tiffany's father. As we know, this is often the motive for some killers, so ding, 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 red flags are flying. But when investigators...
Jose?
Yeah, where is he? So investigators are calling the insurance company, and they learned that it was someone else who had just called about the insurance policy, so now they need to find Jose, and they do. They track him down in a Florida state prison.
Which I don't understand how he got there or why he was there.
I know, I couldn't find anything about that.
I was trying to figure that out, but I could not find anything.
Yeah. Or, like, how long he's been in there.
Right,
I mean, like, what happened between here and there.
Right.
I don't know. So police find phone records between Jose and Beverly while Jose was incarcerated. Luckily for investigators, all inbound and outbound calls that take place in any jail or prison are all on recorded lines, so they listen to their conversations, and they can hear that Beverly was supplying Jose with money while he was locked up. She was putting money in his cantina fund to make sure he had everything he needed, and Jose would also occasionally ask her for money to give to his friends who were low on funds. She was mailing him care packages.
Being a mom.
She was, yes. You can see from their conversations that clearly Beverly cared for Jose like it was her own son.
And she wanted to change the will.
Yeah.
It was her decision, her wanting.
Yep.
no one else is.
Yeah, and police find that conversation where Beverly pretty much tells Jose that she had spoken to a lawyer about the insurance policy. So we can see from that Beverly had chosen to add Jose as a beneficiary to the policy all on her own,
Mm-hmm.
and for whatever reason without any convincing on Jose's part. And because he was jailed at the time of her death, police know that he couldn't have committed the murders himself. They do also look into it from the angle of a possible murder for hire.
Mm-hmm.
They ultimately found no reason to believe that was the case. So now police focus their attention on Jose's ex-wife and Beverly's daughter, Candace. During the investigation into her mother's death, Candace hands over some evidence that changes the perspective of who Beverly was. Candace comes forward and submits some recorded voice messages that she received from her mother, Beverly, and it paints her in a different light. In the messages, she's ranting. She sounds very hateful and angry. She tells Candace things like, "I wish you were never born." According to Candace, things got so bad that she started to fear for her own safety. She had actually filed a harassment complaint against her mother, and the thought of this pushing Candace to murder definitely crosses investigators' minds.
Mm-hmm.
They invite her for an interview, and when she arrives, she shows up with a plastic bag containing 2 cell phones that she says she found inside of her mom, Beverly's house. But that was after investigators had already processed the crime scene.
Right.
So Candace says that...
I just missed these phones.
Yeah, no big deal. You just skimmed over them real quick. Candace believed that the cell phones belonged to the other victims, Beverly's friends and housemates, Pamela and Michael. Investigators can't help but think this is strange.
Because it is.
She brings these 2 phones into them after they've already thoroughly searched the house and did not find them.
Right.
And then she pulls out a stack of receipts.
This one gets me.
I know.
Who in the right mind thinks that this is a good way to go?
Blows my mind. But she pulls
officer.
out this stack of receipts that are from a local grocery store, and on one of the receipts, in her own handwriting, it
Time
says,
of mom's death.
It says, quote, This is the This is the time mom died. What?
See, officer, I was busy.
What does this mean? Well, she was questioned by detectives, and they're probably like, what are you talking about? Candace says that she kept those receipts to prove that her brother, Brett, was with her at the time of her mother's death.
Which, how does that prove that he's with her?
It doesn't. It literally doesn't. Very suspicious, though. So investigators, they're
also,
like...
how do you know what time?
Yeah, exactly. And investigators, like, they're just sitting there probably appalled. Like,
Yes.
who said anything about Brett? Like, at this point, nobody has brought him up into this conversation at all. So yeah, definitely catches their attention. And then, like you said, how do you know when your mom was killed? Do you know something we don't? Because we never put a time of death on it. Like, what? So, pretty soon though, detectives were able to get exactly what they needed, because a witness that worked for the bank that Andrew's life insurance policy was out of,
right,
came forward and gave an account that would change the direction of the entire investigation. This bank teller says that when their father Andrew had died, Candace and Brett came into the bank together trying to find out how much money was in their father's estate. They tried to gain access to Andrew's account, but their access was denied. In response to this, Brett became irate and demanded to know why. And when the bank teller told him he didn't have access because it wasn't in his name, it made him even more angry, and he slammed his hand on the desk and started cussing out the bank teller.
Yeah, because it's all her fault.
Yeah, and then he asks, "It's in Beverly's name, isn't it?" And the bank teller slips up and tells him that, yeah, the account is in Beverly's name. And in response, Brett said something along the lines that he hated his mother and that she should be dead. So detectives show up to question Brett, and he claims he had nothing to do with this triple murder. He said that he hadn't been in his parents' home in months, and that although he had never met his mother's new housemates, Pamela Johns and Michael Ramsey, that he thought they were, quote, homeless bums who were going to take advantage of her. He even suggests that Michael and Pamela may have been the true targets of the murders and that his mother was killed as collateral. He also says that he couldn't have committed the murders because he was at his sister Candace's house all week.
Didn't she show you the receipts?
Right.
We're cleared.
Except for Thanksgiving morning when he was out purchasing cigarettes. So this is obviously suspicious, but as of right now, investigators have no way to disprove his story, so they instead put a rush on the DNA test that was put in for the tissue that was found at the crime scene. And that comes back with not only Brett's DNA on it, but also one of the victims, Michael Ramsey, who, according to Brett, he has never met. So even though, yes, Brett had been in the house, but that was about 6 months ago by his own admission. So yeah, it's understandable.
There's no way to get around it.
Right. It's understandable that some of his DNA would be there, but Michael Ramsey at that point had only lived there for about a month, so the tissue connects them in some way. Right. And like you said,
no way to get around that.
Exactly. So police make their arrest, and Brett Bednarz is charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. At trial, the state presents their version of what they believe happened on that terrifying Thanksgiving Eve. According to them, Brett drove his niece's car over to his mother Beverly's house, where he parked in the driveway. When he got out, he walked through the woods and went up the back stairway and into the house through the sliding glass door. When he walked up to the house, he sees his mother Beverly, who is busy cleaning out his dead father's belongings, and he bursts through the door and confronts Beverly about getting rid of his father's things. In a fit of rage, he pulls out a hammer from his back pocket, and what's just awful is, like, Beverly instantly knew that he was going to kill her.
She ran.
So she tried at her best chance of getting away, ran to the bathroom, but before she could get the door closed behind her, her own son beats her over the head with a hammer until she's dead. The commotion of Beverly's murder causes Michael to come downstairs and into the bathroom, where he is also attacked by Brett upon discovering Beverly's bloodied body. Brett then comes in contact with Pamela in the hallway, who he also strikes in the head with the same hammer. After making sure that each of the victims are dead, he goes into his childhood bedroom and changes out of his clothing, bags up his bloodied clothes, and then starts rummaging through the house in search for money, any important documents, checkbooks, maybe even his mother's will. As he's leaving, he uses a tissue to open the door in an attempt to cover up his fingerprints, but then drops it on the floor and leaves it at the scene while he flees the house, gets back into Tiffany's car, and leaves.
Dumb.
Dumb. Like, you were already dumb before, Brett. Now you're triple dumb. So after the trial, the jury did find Brett guilty of all 3 counts of first-degree murder. He was given 180 years in prison. Now, Candace, on the other hand, even though she was essentially trying to help her brother get away with murder, is not charged with anything.
Mm-hmm.
Her daughter Tiffany and ex-husband Jose are also found to have no involvement. And that's that.
Such a brutal murder.
It's really fucked up.
Like, literally got bludgeoned to death. To even think about taking a hammer to someone's head like that.
Do you know how hard you would have to hit them over and over and over again? He had to have been exhausted afterwards.
Absolutely.
Especially, and then trying to fight off a grown man.
Uh-huh.
Like, these people are fighting for their lives. And in return, you have Brett fighting back and overpowering them.
Uh-huh. Because he has a fucking hammer.
A hammer, though. It's not like he has a gun. He has a hammer. How fucking angry and, like, crazed do you have to be?
Crazed.
To do something like that.
Like he has had some...
To the woman who gave you life. That's what always gets me with these cases. It's disturbing that these, like, children just... Ugh, I can't even put it into words, man.
And it seemed like they were all fine and dandy, like, before the father's death.
Yeah.
So within, like, 2.5 ish months changed so much that now you're bludgeoning her to death.
Yeah. It's really hard to transition into an outro for that because it is so disturbing.
It is. I feel so bad for her.
Well, that is all we have for our case today. But yeah, thank you to our new patron, Lily. And speaking of Patreon, we are going to be posting a new mini episode that will turn into a longer form episode for our top tier patrons. Yeah. So make sure to go check that out.
It's going to be good.
I think that's all. That's all I got for you guys. I hope everyone has a lovely Thanksgiving.
Pass the cranberry sauce.
What is that?
Bob's Burger.
I have never seen that.
Well,
I hope you all have a lovely Thanksgiving. Thanks for listening, and remember to always keep it spooky.